Filth by the Asag Covenant. Part 1. So engrossed was Jacob in the assembly of the rotting body parts of his late father that he didn't notice the sounds of slop falling to the ground outside his door. In his mental state, the teenage boy thought himself to be a figure of horror, partially blinded in one eye, with scars covering his frail torso that told tales of pain. Jacob worked relentlessly, day and night, to undo what had already been done. In his mind, Jacob's appearance would send shivers down the spines of all who'd gaze upon him. His hair was long and unkempt, falling in greasy strands around his face. The hue of his skin was deathly pale, with dark circles beneath his sunken eyes, giving him a skeletal appearance. Jacob was tall and thin, with a gaunt build that seemed almost unnatural for someone so young, and his clothing was old and worn, as if it hadn't been changed in months, and his shoes were scuffed and dirty. But none of that bothered him. All he cared about was putting the pieces back together.
They all deserve to die. You've done the right thing, Jacob. Kill them all, and kill more after that. They all deserve to die,
said the voice in his head. No matter how hard he tried to puncture the needle into his father's dead flesh, it would always bend. He'd left the body to rot for months before believing he could sew it back together. Thus the slop piling up outside the cellar he'd barricaded himself into along with the corpse continued to grow, the stench becoming ever more revolting. No, I can bring him back to life. I just need to put him back together, the unhinged Jacob mumbled to himself. The dark thoughts in his head had manifested into a physical presence. To Jacob, this being was known only as Filth.
But you can kill them all, can't you, Jacob?
The voice said. I don't want to kill anymore. Why can't you leave me alone? Jacob screeched. The needle he clenched between his thumb and index finger in his right hand pierced through his father's dead flesh and into the index finger on his left hand.
But you must kill, Jacob. Killing is the only thing we know.
The voice grew louder. Jacob pulled the needle from his finger and threw it to the floor. The blood that dripped, falling onto his father's body, enticed the homicidal urge in Filth to take over completely. Jacob was of two minds, two personalities. He always had to fight to maintain control.
See what you've done to yourself. Look at it. There will always be blood, always be the exquisite lust of murder. Why relent? Just embrace it,
said Filth. No. Jacob pounded his head with his fist in a fruitless attempt to silence the duality of hunger and good. Stop distracting me. I need to finish this. He will live. Filth laughed.
One cannot bring back the dead, you moron. Look at his decaying body. This man you once knew as your father is nothing more than a rotting carcass. Sewing him back together will do nothing. Burn him, bury him, eat him, I don't care. Just get on with disposing of the body so we can find the next conquest.
In a fit of rage and frustration, Jacob punched his father's torso with the bottom of his fist, which forced the maggots occupying the chest and throat of the corpse to spill out onto the floor. The stench grew ever more abhorrent. Shut up, shut up, Shut up! The slop falling outside his door became louder. You don't know how anything works. After I sew him up, I'll hit him with a defibrillator to bring him back. Then he will live again. Filth laughed hysterically.
You aren't Frankenstein, and that corpse damn sure isn't your monster. Leave the shit-stained carcass and kill for me, boy. Kill for me.
Jacob had yet to lift his hands from the corpse, which allowed the maggots to slither up his wrists and arms. The weight of what he'd done to the man he once called father began to eat at his conscience. The perceived child-molesting fiend who Jacob believed had first raped him at age 6 wouldn't stop. Despite this, Jacob still had lingering feelings for the man responsible for giving him life.
Only I can protect you now, Jacob. I did what the police, your friends, everyone in your life failed to do. Now it's your turn to bestow upon me what is owed. Sate me, boy. Sate me with blood and death. Kill for me.
The slop fell more aggressively. Finally, it began to ooze through the slit between the door and the floor. Jacob cried, "But I don't want to kill anymore. Why are you making me do this?"
I'm not forcing you to do anything. It is what you want. It is what you desire. They all must pay. They all must die.
Louder and louder, the slop fell until the sound of it consumed the room Jacob had trapped himself inside.
Death is calling, my friend. We are both but slaves to the enchantment of murder. You will continue to kill for me. You will submit to filth.
Jacob, having had enough, took his father's severed arm and threw it at the door in frustration at Filth's continued taunts. The pressure building up on the other side of the door could no longer be held at bay. As the rotting arm impacted the doorknob, the door split down the middle, and in splashed the festering liquid made up of piss, shit, blood, guts, and bile. The remains of hundreds of victims had fallen through the ceiling and flooded the cellar where the duality of Jacob and Filth made their kills.
My trophies, they're ruined,
screamed Filth. Jacob fell to the floor, swiped off his feet by the wave of human waste and blood. He sloshed around, grasping for air after the vile liquid fully submerged him. Jacob coughed while stumbling to get back on his feet.
You know what this means, don't you, Jacob? We must now make more trophies, more kills, more deaths. We must replenish our collection. Will you kill for me now, Jacob? Will you kill for me now?
After swallowing a large amount of the liquid upon its initial clash, Jacob lay on his back, floating atop what remained of Filth's trophies. It was then Jacob came to terms with what he truly was. Fashioned by his childhood, Jacob would become a slave to his desires, and he would make them all suffer. I submit myself to you, Filth. It is true. You have been the only one there to protect me. Consider me a slave to murderous intent, a slave to vengeance, a slave to death itself. With a glint of a smile, Jacob stood and breathed in the repugnant stench before bursting out laughing like a psychopath. The madness within him had finally unfolded, and with that, the true killing spree would begin.
We are become one now, my son, my friend, my flesh. We are now aligned.
The duality breathed in the aroma of death, prepared to let loose all inhibitions and embrace their true self, their true nature. Part 2. Having left the house upon gathering all he would need to survive, Jacob stole his father's car, drained the family bank accounts, and pursued those he perceived as guilty of ignoring what had happened to him. Those who had made him what he was would feel the wrath of Filth. After the jars of trophies exploded from the heat in the attic and crashed through the floor and into the cellar of his home, Jacob had no choice but to vacate. The authorities told the press about what could only be described as a sight of hellish, psychopathic horror after what they'd found at his house. Jacob had taken his brother's head and sewn it onto his father's body. The genitals of the two were swapped as they hung on reverse crosses, covered in urine, bile, and feces. The skin on their torsos wholly removed. The arms and legs of his older brother were placed on the points of a giant pentagram drawn in blood on the living room floor. His father's head lay in the center of the pentagram with the word Tormentor carved into his forehead, along with a fat, skinless rat shoved into his mouth. Not a single detective on the scene could imagine what would drive anyone to commit such a beastly act of murder and savagery. Yet, despite witnessing such horror, none of them suspected Jacob. To them, the teenage boy was a missing person who sadly fell prey to the monster who killed his family. They just had yet to find his body.
You've done well, Jacob. There's nothing in this world better than killing,
said Filth. Jacob, driving down Interstate 29, traveling south from Fargo, North Dakota, smiled at himself in the rearview mirror as night fell. The facial expressions between him and Filth were enigmatic. While Filth spoke in the mirror, Jacob listened in the real world. "Are you sure they deserved that?" asked Jacob.
To tell you the truth, they deserved much worse. When we get to Hartford near Sioux Falls and meet with your aunt and cousins, they too will feel the wrath of Filth. He deserved to suffer just as your father suffered, just as you suffered at his whims of torture all those years. They will all pay. They will all die,
said Filth. "I just hope we're doing the right thing, because I don't have any real memory of my father torturing me." Filth chuckled.
I've hidden those memories from you for your protection. Trust me, you don't need or want to access those horrifying images.
"But I just want to be sure what we're doing is right and—"
Enough,
erupted Filth.
We are in this. We are committed. Just look at what he did to your eye. Isn't that reason enough?
Jacob again gazed at himself in the rearview mirror and saw the scar on his right eye.
He did that to you, and you've repaid him tenfold. Now is not the time to become fickle, boy. We must do what we set out to do. We must kill,
proclaimed Filth. Arguing with himself in the mirror led to a passionate debate on whether he was doing what was right. So much so that Jacob hadn't realized he was going well over the speed limit. Sirens wailed behind him, accompanied by flashing lights of red and blue. Jacob's heart dropped when he saw the police car chasing him.
A perfect opportunity to kill again,
said Filth. Jacob slapped himself in the face. No, we can't. He's innocent.
Innocence is an illusion. All are guilty, especially cops. They play judge, jury, and executioner against unarmed civilians daily. They're all murderers, just like us.
But I can't. No, I won't. Jacob jerked the wheel.
But you must, or else you'll rot in a jail cell for the rest of your life.
Filth took control, stabilizing the car and lifting his foot off the gas.
Do exactly as I say if you wish to live through this.
The duality pulled over and turned off the engine.
You've got me riled up, boy. The only thing that can satisfy me now is blood,
whispered Filth. Be quiet, snapped Jacob. The cop approached the car, pointing his flashlight in Jacob's face. With one look, he recognized the boy. Jacob? Jacob Thompson? Said the cop. Officer Wilkinson, Jacob said. They knew each other. Officer Wilkinson had watched Jacob grow up in the small neighborhood he policed before transferring to the highway patrol.
What a stroke of luck. He's guilty, and he must be punished,
said Filth in his mind. Shut up, Jacob mumbled. Jacob, step out of the car. Are you aware what happened to your family? And what are you doing out here? Said Wilkinson. Jacob slowly stepped out of the car, hands shaking.
If he gets on that radio and calls this in, we're fucked,
said Filth. Jacob gazed at Wilkinson's gun and gulped. Do you have any idea how many people are out looking for you? Explain to me what you're doing out here in your father's car so far away from home, especially after what happened. At that moment, Filth took over. The boy known as Jacob fell into temporary slumber, leaving the killer completely unchained from conscience and guilt. Filth dropped to his knees.
I'm sorry, Officer Wilkinson, but I had to get out of there. I couldn't stay. Not after what they did to my family. I didn't know where else to go. I'm on my way to my aunt's place in South Dakota. They said if I told anybody what happened, they'd kill me. I didn't know what else to do.
Tears poured from his eyes. Who are they? Listen, I'll take you down to the station so you can describe the people who did this to our sketch artist. You don't have to worry anymore, Jacob. You're safe now. Filth's eyes turned into giggles.
Yes, I'm safe now. But are you?
Without a second's hesitation, Filth reached into his waistband, pulled out a knife from a sheath located on the right side of his hip, and stabbed Wilkinson between the legs, deep into his crotch.
Search your suspects, officer.
Filth twisted the knife.
And trust no one.
Filth then dug the knife deeper into Wilkinson's crotch before ripping it out. Blood gushed from the open wound, and a single testicle fell from the cop and landed on the street. So immobilized by pain, Wilkinson didn't think to draw his weapon until it was too late. Falling to the ground, screaming in agony, he attempted to pull out his gun. However, the weapon was no longer in his possession. Filth had snatched it from his holster while twisting the knife. Jacob! Why? Why are you doing this? Wilkinson tried to crawl away.
Not Jacob. Filth,
he said, stabbing him in his leg and snatching his radio off his body.
You were there, and you did nothing.
He then stabbed Wilkinson in his buttock.
Look what he did to me. Look at what he did to me.
Filth stabbed him in the hip. No, please, cried Wilkinson.
Look at me, you goddamn bastard. Look at me.
Panting and bleeding out, Wilkinson turned around and gazed upon the boy's face, who was drowned in madness.
Look upon this human canvas. See the scars of torture on this face. You could have done something, yet you did nothing. Nothing.
Wilkinson shook with pain and confusion. There's nothing wrong with your face. There are no scars.
Shut up.
Filth stabbed him in the gut,
Only I can protect Jacob now. Only I can save him.
Filth dug his hand into Wilkinson's stomach through the opened wound.
Murder is the sweetest symphony,
he said joyously. Then, pulling on Wilkinson's guts, Filth yanked a long cord of them from his stomach and shoved them into the dying man's mouth, pushing them down into his throat.
You are what you eat.
Filth, soaked in blood, began to laugh hysterically.
Another day, another kill.
Having sated his bloodlust, Filth gathered the knife and the gun and tossed them into his car. Not wanting to draw further attention to himself, Filth dragged the dead cop back to his police cruiser, threw him in the trunk, and drove the vehicle off the highway. Filth positioned the cruiser into the grassy area so that anyone who drove by would think he was just another cop setting up a speed trap.
It's done,
said Filth, relinquishing control back to Jacob after getting back into the car. Jacob gazed at his blood-soaked hands in horror. Oh, what did you do? What did you do? Filth chuckled.
What I do best. Protect you.
Jacob stared at himself in the rearview mirror as Filth and the reflection laughed sadistically. You killed him. You son of a bitch! How could you? Cried Jacob.
As I've said before, nothing in this world is better than killing, especially when it aligns with our self-preservation. Now drive. We must ditch this damned car before getting to your aunt's house. We can't afford to be pulled over again.
Tears and snot ran down Jacob's face as he started the car and got back on the road.
Don't cry, my dear boy. I did what was necessary. We're safe now. Trust in me.
Part 3. Coming upon the small town of Hartford in South Dakota, where his aunt resided, Jacob felt that Filth was ready to emerge again. The control mechanism that established the dominance between the two was fading. It became clear to Jacob that Filth wanted total dominion over his mind and body. The family that the duality slaughtered at a rest stop on the state line between North and South Dakota made that apparent. A single mother and her 2 5-year-old twin daughters were the latest victims of Filth. Jacob's proclamation of submission to Filth's will during his time in the killing room of his cellar began to weigh on him. Regret filled his conscience when he gazed into those children's eyes as they begged him to stop stabbing their mother. While Filth bathed in the serenity of their suffering, Jacob wept internally. It was all he could do.
We're almost there. I can't wait to kill again,
exclaimed Filth joyously. No more killing, Jacob mumbled.
What did you say?
Filth gazed into the rearview mirror. I said, I won't do it anymore. You've crossed the line with a family back at the rest stop. I don't want any more blood on these hands.
These are my hands, too, and I want them soaked all the time, completely and utterly dripping with blood. Do you understand? We must maim. We must torture. We must kill.
No more. I was a fool to trust in you. You don't care about justice or vengeance. All you want is death.
As do you, my boy. As do you. Don't tell me you didn't take pleasure in slicing those little girls to ribbons. Don't sit there wallowing in self-righteousness as if you didn't will me into existence. You kill not because I'm forcing you to, but because you enjoy it. Admit it, boy. You and I are the same,
said Filth, smiling in the rearview mirror. No, I I can't, Jacob stuttered.
Admit it, boy.
But those girls didn't deserve to die.
We must embrace self-preservation at all costs. We needed a new car, and that mother provided us with one. The fact that her daughters were in the back seat while we were stealing it was just karma. For them, there can be no witnesses, not until we've made them all pay for what they did to us. Now, stop your whining and prepare again to soak our hands in blood. It is what we do best.
Jacob took his eyes off the rearview mirror and focused on the road. They'd entered Hartford, just a few miles from his aunt's house. He hadn't seen her since she lived with them as a child in their family home. Jacob's cousins, Wilbert and Jessica, were around 5 years older and would play with him frequently throughout their childhood, one of the reasons Filth believed they were among the guilty. Why were they not punished? Why were they not abused? Why? Why only him? He would discover the answers when he made the final encounter with his last known kin. Since Filth had hidden his full-scale memories, Jacob needed information from an outside source, and he would get that information after he killed them.
Up there, over the hill, you see the small house in the distance, don't you? That's where they live. Be sure not to park too close. We'll walk there if necessary. We don't need any of these small-town cops seeing the stolen car in her driveway,
said Filth. Jacob complied, secure in an ulterior motive to seek knowledge from his cousins. He pulled the car behind an abandoned farm shack in the middle of a grassy field. After turning off the ignition, Jacob gathered the knife and the gun from the cop he'd killed and stepped out of the car. The town looked deserted, as if society had forgotten about it. To Filth, this was a perfect place to commit murder, with little fear of suspicion or discovery. He could slaughter the rest of his family, steal their car, and head to the next town to continue his long-desired, unending killing spree. Just as the duality was about to begin the walk to Jacob's aunt's home, Filth forced him to stop. Jacob was frozen, unable to take his hand off the car door latch.
"Tend to me, boy,"
growled Filth. "What is it?" Jacob asked, annoyed.
You're hiding something from me, aren't you?
It's impossible for me to hide anything from you. You can see into my head, but I can't see into yours. Jacob snubbed Filth's concerns while desperately trying to hide his true intentions. There was always a special place where Jacob's thoughts were his own. However, in recent years, Filth had been able to weaken Jacob's defenses. That special place in the far reaches of his mind was all he had left.
Don't lie to me, boy. Tell me what you're thinking. I know there's an area closed off to me. Soon it will fall,
said Filth. Are you wanting to protect me or fully control me? Which is it? Jacob fumed.
All I have done is to protect you. I just want to be sure you don't do anything foolish when we arrive. Your sympathies will be the death of both of us,
warned Filth. Trust me the same way I trust you. We'll be fine. There's no need to worry, I promise. Filth relinquished his hold on Jacob's body, allowing him to continue down the road to his aunt's home. Soon, Jacob would discover his sought answers, and Filth would sate the homicidal urge within that pleaded for more death. Part 4. Jacob, is that you? Called his cousin Jessica, whose appearance reflected her rural upbringing since she and her brother had lived most of their lives on a farm after they'd moved out of his father's place in North Dakota. She stood at an average height for her age, with a lean and toned body from years of farm work. Her skin was tanned from spending long hours under the sun, Her eyes were bright and blue, and her face was dotted with freckles, giving her a youthful and wholesome appearance. Jessica wore a short, square-neck, bow-front floral pink jacquard dress, white stockings just past her knees, and a pair of pink boots. The girl's simple yet striking style perfectly matched her down-to-earth personality. This, however, only served to fuel Filth's hunger for cruelty, as he was obsessed with the destruction of innocence and beauty. "Hi, Jessica. Where's your mom and brother?" Jessica ran to him and hugged him until the air left his lungs. "Forget about them. How are you even alive? What are you doing here? We thought you got killed just like everyone else. The police have been looking for you for days. How did you escape?" Jessica's face turned red with shock. Jacob gazed at her while formulating a story that would be somewhat believable. I didn't know where else to go, so I escaped. My dad's car was my only hope, so I took it and drove here. I just wanted to get as far away from that place as possible." Jessica gazed at him skeptically. "But they said on the news that the basement was where the killers dismembered everyone, so how are you able to get away?"
Just fucking strangle her now and get it over with,
said Filth internally. I crawled through the basement window after hearing them coming down the stairs. Can we please just go inside? I haven't eaten in days, said Jacob. Sure thing. Wilbert and Mama went to the farmer's market for more bird feed. Come on in. I'll fix you something to eat, she said.
I can't wait for her warm blood oozing through my fingers, whispered Filth.
Be quiet, demanded Jacob. Did you say something? Asked Jessica, facing him. No, I'm just talking to myself, he chuckled. Jessica turned back around and they both entered the kitchen. Jacob and Filth mind-wrestled for control. Filth took hold of the knife from the sheath on his hip and grinned. Jacob, struggling to stop him, refused to remove the knife. Sweat began to drip from his forehead.
Let me kill her,
Filth screamed in his mind. Before long, the knife was out and risen in the air, ready to be plunged into his cousin's back.
Yes, hissed
Filth. I can't let you do this. Not yet, shouted Jacob. Jessica gathered eggs, ham, and pancake batter from the fridge and spun around to face Jacob. Within an instant, Jacob dropped the knife to the floor before Jessica could see him holding it above his head. You dropped something, she said with a wink. I'm sorry, stuttered Jacob. Don't worry about it. I need a knife to cut this here ham anyway. She placed the foodstuff on the table and bent over to pick up the knife, revealing her pink and white polka dot panties. Jacob was shocked by the sight. He'd never been with a girl, and his teenage hormones were racing. Jessica, still bent over, gazed at him and giggled. You like what you see? She asked. I didn't see anything, Jacob gulped. You know, cousin, I always thought you were cute. She approached him and ran her index finger down his chest. What? His nervousness was affecting his speech. Aren't you hot in this shirt? It looks like it has bloodstains on it. Come on, let's get rid of it. Take it off, she commanded. But I said take it off. Her tone became much more demanding. Filth was silent throughout the whole ordeal. She ripped off his shirt and caressed his sweaty chest. What are you doing? Asked Jacob. You're so sexy. Has anyone ever told you that? Oh, no. Well, I'm telling you now. She stepped closer to him, meeting his gaze, and began to unbuckle his belt. Mama and Wilbert won't be back for another few hours. We have plenty of time. Plenty of time to do what? Asked Jacob. I know what boys want. It's the same thing I want from you right now. I don't know. Come on, Jacob. Ain't you ever had a girl before? She removed her dress from over her head. The matching pink and white polka dot bra and panties accentuated her curves, hugging her figure in all the right places. The bright pink color perfectly complemented her sun-kissed skin. Her nipples were hard and visible under her bra. "Don't you want to fuck me, Jacob?" Jacob's heart dropped. "But we're cousins, first cousins," she giggled. "Well, that's what makes it even more exciting. The more forbidden, the more intense the pleasure." Jessica dragged him to the kitchen's far end and slammed him against the wall. "Fuck me, Jacob, fuck me," she said with an alluring gaze. She got down on her knees and pulled down his pants. Jacob smiled and closed his eyes, finally allowing it to happen. The moment Jessica saw Jacob enraptured in the feeling, she immediately grabbed a pot on the stove nearby and smashed him in the head. Completely caught off guard, Jacob stumbled before she hit him a second time, knocking him out cold. She dropped the pot on Jacob's unconscious body and smiled. "You've come home. You finally returned to us. I've been waiting for this day all my life. Welcome back, Filth." Part 5. Wilbert, Jessica's younger brother by a year, was not known for his good looks. His rough and rugged appearance matched his mean and unpleasant personality. Wilbert's face was pockmarked with scars from past fights, and his crooked nose gave him a threatening look. The oily hair on his head was always ragged, and his unshaven face added to his unsavory exterior. His eyes were dark and sunken, with a cold, calculating stare that made others uneasy in his presence. He dressed in a messy and careless manner, often wearing the same torn and dirty clothes for days on end. Wilbert's cruel demeanor was reflected in his appearance, and his reputation for being a sadistic bully was well known in the small town where they lived. Even though he was young, Wilbert was feared by many, and his presence alone was enough to send shivers down the spines of the people in town. Appearance-wise, the difference between him and Jessica was night and day, yet they both had a hunger for brutality. Vivienne, Jessica and Wilbert's mother, the matriarch, was not known for her beauty. She had a weathered and wrinkled face marked by years of hard living. Her missing teeth gave her a gap-toothed smile that was less than inviting. The hair on her dandruff-infested head was thin and stringy, and her clothes were often tattered and ill-fitting. She was a self-proclaimed witch, and her belief in the supernatural was evident in her eccentric clothing and accessories. Vivienne often wore a long, flowing skirt adorned with mystical symbols and jewelry that glinted in the light, symbols of devil worship. Her fingers were decorated with numerous rings, each with a unique meaning. Despite her unappealing appearance, something alluring about her drew people in. Her deep, hypnotic voice and ability to read people's fortunes kept people returning for more of her dark wisdom. She was a mysterious and enigmatic figure who was feared and revered in the community. No one dared cross her. Jessica and Wilbert had grown up with their mother's eccentricities and had long ago accepted her for who she was. In fact, they welcomed it. They were proud of it. But as strange and unsettling events began in their small town, they knew their mother's witchcraft was to blame, and with the return of their cousin, all the stars aligned for the apocalypse to come. "Wake up, my dear nephew," said Vivienne. Jacob, with his head pounding, opened his eyes to see that he was laying down, bound to a massive steel cross, completely naked. His aunt, to his disgust, was fully nude, covered in goat's blood. She wore the intestines of the goat on her head like a crown. The stench made his eyes water. "What the hell's happened? What are you doing?" he exclaimed, tugging at the tight chains securing his wrists and ankles. "The question is, what are you doing, cousin?" said Wilbert, placing the severed bloody head of the goat on Jacob's stomach. "You came here to kill us, right?" Jessica whispered in his ear. "This is a glorious day. Your being here is proof the ritual worked just as intended," Vivienne smiled. Jacob's heart pounded. "What the hell are you talking about? What ritual?" The siblings gazed at their mother with evil, sadistic grins. "I'll let you know was set in motion years before your birth. This is the coming of Balaam, or as you may know him, Filth," said Vivienne. "Balaam? The demon Balaam? No, this can't be." "Oh, yes, it can," said Jessica. How do you know about Filth?" "I know of him because I put him there, dear nephew. My sister had to die to give birth to you. She willingly gave her life for the cause." Jacob clenched his fists as a single tear ran down his face. "Our sacrament was solidified when you murdered your father and brother. Filth undoubtedly fabricated false memories in your head to help you do the deed. Unfortunately, Filth has inhabited your subconscious for so long that, he may have forgotten his true name and purpose. We're here to complete the ritual and bring Balaam into this realm." "Lies! Fucking lies!" screamed Jacob with savage aggression. "I'm afraid not, Jacob. We grew up with the stories of children," said Wilbert. "You were always the special one. What other reason do you have for killing your family?" They deserved to die. My father molested me. My brother did nothing. He just stood there and watched. They abused me and mutilated me. They had to pay." Vivienne laughed. "Is that so? Look in that mirror and show me where they scarred you." Jessica placed a mirror right above Jacob's sight so he could observe himself from head to toe. He was rendered speechless to find the wounds he'd seen so many times over the years on his face and body gone. What do you perceive, Jacob? Tell us what you see," Vivienne grinned. "My scars, the mutilations, they vanished," he stuttered. "Exactly. Filth did what he had to do to sate the murderous intent that drives him. Your father never molested you. Over the years, he tried to undo all the work your mother and I had put into you while she was pregnant. Even after my sister died, your father relentlessly saw that you got the help you needed. He believed that you were suffering from bipolar disorder, when in reality it was Balaam. Balaam trying to claw his way out of your subconscious and take over your soul." Wilbert knelt and put his lips close to Jacob's ears. "I was only a child, but I remember it well. The ritual, the words my mother chanted over your mother's pregnant belly, the power within this coven brought forth Balaam into your soul before you were born, and now the ritual can draw to its conclusion. Sister, you're up." Jessica smiled, shed her clothes, and climbed on top of Jacob. "Filth, where are you? You said you'd protect me. Help me now. I need you," cried Jacob. The three of them laughed. "While you're tied to this cross, Filth, or Balaam, is secluded to your subconscious," said Vivienne. "And when he's transferred to me, he will have forgotten any memory of being Filth," Jessica proclaimed. "Transferred to you? I don't understand," Jacob winced. She bent over and licked his ear. "I'm ovulating, cousin. You're going to come inside me and make me pregnant. Then I shall give birth to Balaam, and our coven will rule the world for all time." Jessica began to moan while grinding her dripping wet pussy on his manhood. No matter how hard he struggled, Jacob couldn't get her off of him. "That's it, sister. Nice and slow," said Wilbert. Against his will, Jacob felt himself becoming erect. She grinned. "I have to say, you're quite big, cousin." Jessica took hold of his manhood and pushed it in. She sighed with pleasure as his cock made his way deep inside her. Please, stop this. I'm begging you, please, pleaded Jacob. Come on, cousin. I know you like this. I know it feels good to you. That's it, my little princess. Back and forth and up and down. Force him to come inside you, said Vivienne in a whisper. Jacob felt something bubbling in his gut. At first, it was little more than a tickle, but within seconds it became a sharp, stabbing pain in all his organs. Yes, come forth, my lord, said Jessica. Jacob gazed down at his belly and saw the face of a demonic figure imprinted on his stomach in twisted flesh and leaking blood. Ah! He screamed. Jessica rocked back and forth on his cock faster, harder. Come inside me, Jacob. Get me pregnant, she said in a tone of dominance. Blood began to pour from Jacob's eyes and ears. Vivienne and Wilbur dropped to their knees and chanted. Then, with one last thrust, Jacob climaxed, and his entire body exploded, leaving blood, bones, and chunks of flesh to fly everywhere. Jessica, covered in her cousin's blood, fell off the cross onto the floor. She lay on her back and saw her stomach grow to the size of a basketball. Wilbert and his mother crawled over to Jessica and held her legs back. It's almost done. All you have to do is push, shouted Vivienne. Jessica screeched inhumanly as Balaam clawed his way out of her. They could hear the demon biting and chewing on her insides. The demon's claws sprouted from her vagina, opening the hole wider until he'd wholly tore the girl in half. Jacob's and Jessica's souls hovered above them, before fading into a dark mist of oblivion. Vivienne and Wilbert bowed before the demon as he stood, covered in blood and bile. Balaam gazed at them and grinned with razor-sharp teeth. The three-headed demon's appearance was terrifying. His body was covered with thick black scales that blazed in the dim light. He stood at a commanding height, with muscular arms and legs that looked capable of ripping anyone he encountered to shreds. The head on the right was that of a bull. The head on the left was that of a ram, and in the center was the head of a man, its face twisted into a grotesque expression, with deep-set eyes that glowed with an ethereal blackness. Balaam sprouted wings that were massive and leathery, with a wingspan that seemed to stretch from one side of the room to the other. They flapped menacingly, creating gusts of wind that smelled of rot and death. Grant us this bounty so that our coven can rule by your side, said Wilbert. Balaam raised his hand and formed a large machete made of human bone.
I rule alone,
proclaimed the demon, slicing them both in half. Their souls screamed in torment and pain before vanishing the same way the others had. Having successfully manipulated his way into this realm, Balaam raised both hands, turning the sky blood red. Blood rained down on the masses, choking all of humanity in filth. Balaam gazed at red sky and whispered, And Satan said, The wicked shall inherit the earth. He laughed, waving his hands, unearthing his demonic powers. A throne of bone and flesh materialized before him. Darkness befell the planet, making way for Balaam's master, the Emperor of Darkness, to seize control of all the absentee God had created.
Jacob, my vessel, may your soul forever gaze into the oblivion of darkness while the devil rules this world.